Welcome to The Digital Difference with Scott Gulliver and Oliver Moradi. Hello everyone, welcome to episode 10. Can't believe it, but episode 10 of the Digital Difference podcast with me, Scott Gulliver, and of course, Oliver Moradi. How's it going today, Ollie? You doing all right?
Yeah, really good. Early start for us today, Scott, but
I know.
I'm sure we'll battle through.
Yeah, we're trying out a few different times and stuff that work for us at the moment, so we'll see how that impacts things, but hopefully not too much. Episode 10 already. So we're covering today essentially like the second half of what we were talking about last week. Ollie, right?
Yeah, so last week we talked about the changing world and how digital within the current pandemic has had an effect on people, culture, and teams. And today we're going to look at it from more of an aspect of how businesses are dealing with the current pandemic within the digital world, and what they can do to sort of navigate through that and what possible changes they might be making.
Right. So we kind of covered, as you said, like the people side of things last time, didn't we? And the culture and the teams. Yeah. And I guess this is more of the outward facing parts of the business.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Great.
So like last week, we started off with kind of talking about how COVID-19 now has completely changed the business and economic world. But I mentioned about how it's changed it for people, but I didn't actually mention really how it changed for businesses. So, there's a huge reliance on digital now, I think, for all businesses, especially as that sort of face-to-face has now disappeared. With us going in and out, I mean, I know this week we've been told that we're going into sort of a second lockdown within the UK. So, I mean, that's not great in itself. So obviously, I think it's very unreliable to kind of hope that, businesses are going to be going back to face with their clients anytime soon. So I think that now there is a huge reliance on digital. We're going to kind of go into how they may adapt to that change today. I think one of the first things that I've seen so far is there's a lot of current job roles at the moment that are at risk, where businesses before didn't see them as a risk to have them around because they had the money obviously to spend on that job role. It was a nice to have, if you will. Now obviously there's these job roles that aren't cost effective for businesses, and unfortunately a lot of people are being made redundant in this time. I think what you're going to see now in sort of the future world is a merging of job roles. So there's going to be because there's not a lot of that sort of face-to-face aspect of the role anymore. You might find that a lot of the front people facing job roles might be lost, or they might develop into something completely different, like something online within, say, like a Zoom call or some sort of like online digital, like social digital platform. And I think that that's only going to happen by merging of job roles. I think there's going to be a new responsibility on people within businesses now and on employees within businesses to take up more and more responsibility, if you will, and actually start doing more like different parts of these jobs. I mean, I've seen it myself in several different businesses. Friends are now picking up new parts to their job, things they would never have done before. And I think that, that now is going to be a big change within businesses, is that people are going to have this responsibility, and they're going to be more rounded as employees, and their job roles are going to be more rounded.
Yeah, exactly. You're right. Like by necessity now, companies are just having to put more responsibility on fewer members of staff, aren't they? But as you say, the more rounded thing's really interesting, because I think as we get back to the standard, more narrow focus for employees, I think they're going to have a better appreciation of what other people do in the business. And I think especially for those roles in the past that have been more non-technical, maybe kind of more standard admin roles or whatever it may be, we've been like thrust into this environment now where people have to use digital tools and digital methods of getting things done. And as you say, a lot of people are also picking up things that are slightly outside of their normal skill set. And I think, I mean, the hope is obviously that when we get back to a world that's a little bit more normal than this, that we see people that are a bit more rounded, you say, and have just a better appreciation of what everyone else is going through.
Exactly. And, coming out of this COVID-19 world, you might have people who are going to be multi-skilled, and in the long term, that's going to benefit people. But I mean, I think that's the way the world's going at the moment. For now, obviously, there's a very reactive way that businesses are dealing with this is kind of like cost saving immediately, cut all the waste that you can within the business, and try and put as much responsibility on one person as possible. It's kind of like a pendulum. It has swung one way, but in the end, it's going to have to swing back. And I think that obviously that will kind of find a middle balance. So it might not be as high responsibility as I'm kind of making it out at the moment, but I think that at this very point in time, this is how businesses are reacting to COVID-19. And within digital especially, these jobs are gonna have more responsibility. They just are, and it's going to be one of those situations where everyone's going to have these multiple skills. And it'll be interesting in the future to see how that actually benefits businesses, because obviously if someone goes into a new role as, say, a project manager, but they've had to work admin half the time at the same point, they're going to have a better understanding of how the business works. So in the long term, actually could work out, and it could benefit businesses. But for now, that's how I think they're going to have to operate, just to save costs. And I think small businesses may have the upper hand in this situation, because they can operate at a very low capacity, with very little resource. They can adapt and they can change. But with that, however, you're going to find that a lot of these contractors who've gone out there may actually see that there's also this gap in the market at the moment with where people can operate. With this COVID-19 coming around, there'll actually be a bit of opportunity. So I think that there's going to be a lot of competition for these small businesses, where contractors may starting up their own businesses, and there's going to be people fighting for work. I mean, I know you and I, Scott, have seen there's quite a few small businesses starting up now, which we didn't expect before when we first started our business. And I think that small businesses will be able to handle this. They'll be able to navigate COVID-19 quite well. I think they'll be able to adapt to change. At the moment, the economy is very, very active to everything. And the whole thing to get through this is adapting to change, and is changing as and when the economy changes. And I think with small businesses, they can also exploit the gaps within those changes, whereas bigger companies are kind of stuck on a path, and it's very difficult to steer a huge ship. I kind of like to see it as that sort of metaphor. You're either in like a tiny little speedboat where you can turn the steering wheel, it turns really quickly, or you're in the Titanic,
Yeah. Equally though, like that, I still find it so frustrating that these larger companies still operate in this way that isn't reactive, because as we've said time and time again, you have to be reactive these days to keep that upper hand in whatever situation you're in. And I think even the large companies can do a lot the way that they operate and still be pretty agile, whether that's like splitting down departments or rethinking how they approach problems, or maybe devolving some of the decision making to the kind of lower levels. I think a lot of that can go a long way to helping companies be reactive. And it's unfortunate it's taken a pandemic to show companies that they really need to be in that mode by default. But hopefully going forward, we'll see that I think especially with the second wave as well, we're now seeing, I think companies are now thinking that this is probably going to be for a long run, and we're seeing a lot of companies move out of the mode of just kind of downing tools and hoping that things blow over pretty quickly, to actually, like you say, using contractors and starting small companies of their own potentially, to deal with the long-term effects that we're going to see of this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's going to have to be huge changes within large businesses. They're going to have to do it quickly as well. And if they haven't already started doing it, they're definitely going to have to start doing it. But I think most large businesses have reacted rapidly towards this. However, it's like you said, Scott, it is mad that companies aren't agile enough nowadays that they can just change and can adapt as and when they want to. However, I think even before COVID-19, there was a lot of companies who were very slowly transitioning into an agile way of thinking. And at the moment, they're trying to speed that process up, but it's quite hard to change a culture, and it's quite hard to change like a company's way of thinking and company's way of operating, especially if people within that business and employees within that business are used to a certain culture and used to a certain way of operating. You're all of a sudden telling them that, it's not going to be like that. People don't change that quickly. So the more people that are on board, I think it's harder to get that change in place. Whereas if you have a smaller business, if you've got, say, 4 or 5 people within your business, I think it's quite easy to communicate that change and try and get people out of that sort of headspace and get people into a new sort of way of thinking, a new sort of culture. Larger companies should have been more reactive. They should have been in place where they could adapt and change. But like I said, it is an old school way of thinking, and as well as I do that any large business that you've worked in, if it has to change, it's not going to be overnight. And I know quite a few companies who've been doing it for the last 5 years and still nowhere near to changing now. So maybe COVID-19 actually might force companies to kind of get into this sort of culture of rapid change and sort of adapt to the environment, adapt to the economy.
That's a really good point. I think that we keep hearing as well that I heard a really good point the other day that it's not necessarily a game changer for a lot of companies, but it's forced them to accelerate in what they probably had already planned anyway. And that quite often directly relates to things like working from home and the tools and practices, but also, like you say, the way of thinking as well, and the way they operate by default, can certainly be banded under that as well.
Definitely. Absolutely. So I kind of want to go into digital marketing first, because I think it's really important right now for all businesses to get their digital marketing up together, because obviously with lockdown and all this kind of stuff going on, you don't know what's going to happen in the real world. So I think the digital world right now is literally what's keeping the economy held together. I mean, if the servers of the world went down right now, I think there'd be, if the servers went down beforehand, I think there'd be absolute chaos. But right now, there'd be no hope whatsoever. I think the first thing really about larger businesses right now is there needs to be a community feel. And there needs to be the sense of everyone's got each other's back. Everyone's out there to help each other. We're all in this together. And, at the moment, I have seen it quite a lot. Larger companies are helping the community. They are offering things, even if it is a marketing ploy. They are still actually giving out free things that they didn't before. And it's kind of offering that freemium service that they would have done before. Maybe whether it's personalized ads for people, or whether it's kind of like offering that sort of, that free consultancy, for instance, or offering that free service, or there was a lot of apps at the time who were saying, I know it's a great marketing ploy, but there's a lot of gym apps at the time that were saying, come and use our app for free that we usually charge for £100 a year, because they can use it for free for 6 weeks, but after 6 weeks that person's hooked in and they're on that roll, and they're going to want to pay for it, aren't they? And I'll be quite honest with you, I used to when this first went into it, there was a free sort of trial on a gym app for 6 weeks, and I thought, this would be great because I'm going to be locked inside. I might just start doing that instead myself. And 6 weeks came, and I thought, you know what, I'm really into the routines of this, so I'm going to just have to buy it. And I think that so I completely fell for it. And I think it's a great time for larger companies to actually be marketing themselves, offering sort of that, we help the community sort of message, and at the same time maybe actually get a good bit of marketing out of it. So there is things within this COVID-19 world that that can benefit these companies.
Yeah, like you say, it's a great opportunity actually, and I think we've already seen this before the pandemic hit, that it's offering this kind of freemium way of working, or even just giving things first and having the expectation back can be a great way to actually build business, especially for those smaller companies. But I think it does have to be genuine, doesn't it? It does actually have to come across as genuine, because especially now, people are more than ever pretty vulnerable. In a lot of cases, people have lost their jobs or are really struggling financially. And even when you're operating kind of B2B, companies are still dealing with a lot of problems at the moment. And it certainly wouldn't be right, and probably can be pretty damaging if you come across as trying to get one up in amongst all of this.
Yeah, definitely. And like you've hit the nail on the head there, really, with it's how they market it, and they have to make themselves look like they're doing it for the people, even if they aren't, even if there is a hidden agenda. You can always tell. So there's a very specific way in how these companies do need to go out and advertise and market themselves. Like I said, fair enough, offering a 6-week free thing and then saying, if you want to end your trial there, you can. Mm-hmm. That's a great way of doing it, because there's no obligation to anything, there's no signing up to anything, but it's just kind of, if you like our app, come and try it out for free. And I'm sure a lot of people did, and it was at the time, like I said, they did exploit a good opportunity, because a lot of people are going to be at home, a lot of people are going to have more time to work out. So why not give people 6 weeks free trial, and then see if they like it, then they go and pay. So yeah, I think definitely, like you said, it has to be marketed in the right way. Otherwise, it's just going to look like they're trying to exploit people. And like I said, with vulnerable people at the moment, is a very dodgy area to exploit.
Great time for things like content marketing, isn't it? Like that's had a big resurgence lately in terms of being a great way to market. But
yeah,
now more than ever, giving away your content for free in an effort to genuinely help people, and at the same time stand out as an expert in your field is a great thing to do right now.
I actually thought it's always a great thing to do, to be quite honest with you. I think it's a great model for any business to follow, because it's just kind of proving to your customers, your customer base, that your product is that good, and it's also having confidence in your product as well. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of like, it's going back to even if you think about gaming, Scott, demos, like how good were demos to have back in the day, when you went onto any game. I know this is looking back a very long time ago, but PlayStation 1 used to give a demo 1 disc or a demo 2 disc, and you could try all the different games. Mm-hmm. Shows how old I'm getting now, but yeah, even back then, demo 1, demo 2, things like that, they had all these different games on them. You could try them out, and if you liked them, then that was sort of confidence in your product, and that was giving the consumer a chance to try it out and say, do you know what, I really am going to get along with this product. And you're just enticing more people. I always think it does definitely work. So definitely follow a freemium service if any business can. And that'll be my message to any small businesses right now, is if you want an edge over anybody else, you need to offer something. You can't just go out there word of mouth and say, we can do this and this and this for you, because at the moment people are going to be skeptical, and the money out there, people aren't going to want to part with very easily.
Absolutely.
So it's going to be a situation where you need to prove that your product's going to help them before they want to part with their money. And I think that right now, like, that sort of freemium is the sort of best way to get out there and communicate with your customer base. I think hand in hand with that is positive messaging, like we kind of said before, Scott. And I think it's kind of keeping within that that global focus on well-being at the moment. Like you said, you touched on it with vulnerable people. You can market and still have a positive message, and this kind of, like I said, this does go hand in hand, because you're trying to market for the people. You're trying to say to everybody right now, we have this great product. It's free for you to use for now, but there's no obligation. There's nothing to have. This is just for you to use at the moment. If it works out for you, it does. If it doesn't, thank you for trying it. And I think that, just having that sort of, that no pressure, no strings attached, like sort of messaging behind any sort of marketing campaign at the moment is great. It it does, like I said, does help on that sort of that focus of that global well-being, you know, keeping people's spirits up, and at the same time, people give your company will keep a company in a better standing more than anything else. As to a company that says try this, and then all of a sudden they've automatically taken direct debit from you,
Yeah.
and you know, then you're fighting with them, and they're telling you no, and then there's this sort of negative feel around it. You know, that's not in keeping with this global well-being scheme and initiative. So I think sort of having just better positive messaging is key in this situation.
Yeah, it's definitely going to help how people perceive your product, isn't it? But as well, the other opportunity here is that aligning your product or your service or your content even around well-being will help. I mean, it's what people are searching for at the moment, right? It's what they're actively looking for. So aligning it with that will help it to just stand out in terms of engagement.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's so important. It's just so important, and I think it just keeps people's spirits up. Yeah, so I think you need to think about pay-per-click, sort of where marketing at the moment. Traffic has massively increased during this period. So at the moment, you know, there's a lot of digital content out there, and I think it would benefit really well, like for any sort of company to use a pay-per-click method of kind of getting that content to your customer base. Pay-per-click, obviously, because there's so many people on there, yeah, pay-per-click might be a bit more expensive than it was usually, but you will see higher rise in numbers of people like coming onto your content, clicking on your content, and going into certain areas, and within that, you know, even if there is a slight cost increase, there will definitely be a better output, especially if your product's good enough and if your marketing is good enough around that product. So it's definitely a good idea to kind of think about pay-per-click at the moment.
The other thing to think with pay-per-click as well is potentially, I mean, one thing we've seen that's worked really well lately is combining pay-per-click ads with offering free services off the back of it as well, or free content. So you might be giving away a course, but actually preloading that with some paid ads might seem pretty counterintuitive, but it's all about the long game with these things. And offering free content behind an ad is a really compelling thing for people to click on and engage with. If you're paying for your pay-per-click ads, I mean, if it is that model that you're going for, then the worst thing you want is having an ad that looks like it's really selling you something, and then landing on a page with a product or service that doesn't really stand up to people engaging with it. But again, giving away free content in the long run will hopefully have a lot of impact on your business anyway. And right now, it seems to be the way to go, especially with people in the vulnerable state they are and with less income to play with, especially for that B2B side. So people looking for advice and expertise for free or low cost is kind of unfortunately up there at the moment. But playing the long game with this, there's going to be opportunity out the back of it, and that could be a great thing just to explore.
Absolutely, Scott. And you kind of hit the nail on the head there as well. The content needs to back it up. Whether it's freemium or not, it does need to back it up. It needs to be good enough. You know, if you are paying a premium for that sort of digital marketing, it does need to back it up. So maybe there's an idea there or an opportunity right now to like refresh your brand and your digital content you have out there. You have to kind of think that any digital content you have or like your current branding is now going to be the face of the company. Whether, I don't know what company you have out there, whether it's a small retail store to whether it's a large sort of software company, no matter what happens now, like your company is not going to be, the face of your company isn't going to be you anymore. It's going to be your website. Unfortunately, that is just the way it's going to have to be going forward. Of course, there's going to be things like Zoom calls that are going to be able to back that up. And, you know, you just won't be the visual face of your company anymore. So a refresh of your brand and refresh of your digital content right now is more important than anything. I think that if you get ahead in that sector right now, you'll also get ahead, and you'll also have an opportunity to get ahead of everybody else within the market. And, you know, you might be able to dominate that space. But to kind of leave it as a sort of your old content and your old branding and things like that, people may not react to it as well as they would do with a sort of a fresh look and fresh feel. And I think that, you know, that sort of new brand will be the foreseeable face of your company. So it has to be really good. So maybe it's kind of and that sort of that content as well. So maybe it's kind of diverting a lot of the energies that would have gone into other sections of your business, of maybe running the day-to-day operations of, say, a face-to-face retail store, for instance. Mm-hmm. And now, you know, a lot of that needs to go into, what does my brand look like? What does my website look like? What does my digital content look like? And how am I going to fix that?
And even for those companies that are still mostly offline, it's now experiences like what happens when I actually search my company or search for what my company will provide the answer to. And then down to experiences like how well does booking experiences go? Because a lot of that will put people off, and people are looking to do that from home first of all these days before they get in contact with you. It's definitely worth exploring on kind of all fronts, isn't it?
Definitely. I mean, you know, ask yourself some questions like, what do my customers want now? What do they need to hear? These are just simple questions. Just ask yourself these simple questions. Can my brand fulfill that need now? You know, do I have digital content that's good enough for people to interact with? Is my UX okay? There's all these different things that you need to take into account now, because, like I said, if you were an offline company, for instance, you probably didn't have much, or you probably didn't need to rely on a strong internet base. I'm not saying that everybody doesn't out there. You might have a great internet site and you might have a great branding. In that case, wicked, carry on. But there's a lot of companies out there that have this outdated sort of digital presence that needs to be updated, really. And, you know, just ask yourself some simple questions. Is COVID-19 now going to impact my marketing strategy? If it is, how can I change it? You know, do I want to redirect customers from physical stores to virtual?
And this is about as well, just not just accepting that I'm in an offline like place of work, so I'm going to get less customers now, but actually thinking about how can I diversify to keep on top of the numbers we expected, and actually when things hopefully do eventually get back to what we saw pre-pandemic, then you'll have a few more revenue streams to explore as well. Exactly.
And this is where your marketing needs to really focus around. It's asking yourself these questions and think, and if the questions are, or if the questions are like, what do my customers want now? They want to shop online. Then the answer is digital marketing, digital content online needs to be improved, and there needs to be more of it.
Yeah.
It's very simple. It's supply and demand. Actually, if you look at it in terms of a business strategy, just within marketing, and you know, marketing will help that a lot. You know, I think right now though that you need to refrain from too much marketing as well. A lot of people are getting. I said about personalized ads before, but there's personalized ads, and then there's using your customer information to kind of exploit them in every single aspect that they have. So like, you know, sending text messages to their phones every 2 minutes, sending them direct emails every 2 minutes. People are just going to get tired of it. There needs to be a good balance, and you also want to use that push. You don't want to use that push and pull system. So a lot of time, there's companies that are pushing the marketing messages onto people right now, keeping in line with that sort of positive messaging, and you want to pull people towards you. So your digital marketing needs to be more around how can I pull the customers in, not how can I push my messages on the customers, and sort of keeping in line with the wellbeing scheme.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of companies, aren't we, almost acting a little bit desperate with their marketing, and it comes across in that way, unfortunately. It is super important for you to get out there and amongst people, especially on social media and other places that your customers will be these days. But like you say, it's about having a bit of tact with it and knowing your audience as well. Like you said, just asking questions like, what would my customers want to hear? Maybe they do want to hear, 4 or 5 times a day around what I do. And that might be right for your audience, but a lot of the time it's not as well. And there just seems to be this misunderstanding of what people actually want to hear as opposed to what you want to say as a company. And they do need to be aligned, because otherwise it doesn't work.
Absolutely. And consumers also don't want to hear about COVID-19 24/7. They live it every day.
Yeah.
And they don't want a constant reminder when they're sat down at their computers or they get a notification on their phone about how your new product can help you get through COVID-19, because immediately they think, oh yeah, well, there's something bad going on at the moment and I'm going to need this to get through COVID-19. And it doesn't send that positive message, and straight away there will be a negative link with your product. You don't want that, because obviously as and when we do come out of this, there's going to be a negative link with your company around COVID-19. So try and stay away from the messaging around COVID-19. If it's really important stuff, then obviously, yeah, you're going to need to send it out. I mean, obviously, due to COVID-19, we're going to have to stop operating and this and this and this. That's fair enough. You have to send that out, but refrain it to the important outbound messages, not to every other minute marketing around COVID-19 itself and making COVID-19 a point within your digital marketing. I just any sort of marketing, actually, I just don't think that it's the best way forward. I think that you need to reward for your digital use, and again, that's keeping within that positive messaging. At the moment, there's a lot of because that you can't go into store at the moment. There was reward schemes when you went to store. I mean, if you go into any shopping store, like if you buy, I don't know, for instance, if you go to Tesco, Scott, right now, if you buy like 30 products and you have your Tesco's card, they give you a point scheme, what have you. Mm-hmm. A lot of companies maybe need to do that online now, reward their customer base for using their digital content and for using their websites and things like that to buy things and to purchase products.
It comes back to choice again, doesn't it, though? It's all just about offering lots of choice to your customers. And even beyond the pandemic, we're going to see a hopefully more diverse audience that just want more choice and want to do things in their own way.
Exactly. And it's kind of just having those reward schemes in place, and it just helps boost that message as well. It just helps people totally get in there. And analyze the market. I think that's more important now than ever. Like a lot of companies, I swear, a lot of people just go off it on a whim because they think they know better than what's going on. Actually, go and get some analytical market data and see what's going on. See where people are, where people are operating. Where the customer base is. What are people doing? How do we get the offline shoppers online? Where are the offline shoppers shopping at the moment? Because obviously they're not shopping anywhere. Where's the increase of these offline shoppers operating within the digital world? And sort of start aiming for that. There are a lot of offline shoppers now who have resorted to going online, and it's kind of exploiting those areas. And building your messaging around that.
Yeah, I think this starts as well with just looking at your own market, doesn't it? As well, we're seeing a changing pattern in behaviours at the moment. So just speaking to your current customer base and looking at what's currently working for them or what they might like to see now that things have kind of changed a little bit. That can be a great way just to make sure that you're still aligning with your current customer base, and you'll also probably find like new avenues to get to new audiences at the same time. Yeah,
definitely, absolutely. So I'll kind of want to move on to digital tools and content that businesses can now use. And I think I've said it before, but I think like creating content that supports working from home, and I mean internal content, so like internal software and that people can use that supports that sort of work from home model at the moment. It's a great place to sort of exploit for any business right now. Even if you're creating the actual content that businesses can use to work from home, or you're using your internal teams, you're a large business and you have internal teams creating software that allows people to work from home better in a more effective way. Either way, work from home is going to be the future from now on, or for the foreseeable future at least. I don't want to predict how the economy is going to look, but equally, I think it's going in that way that there's a lot of people saying out that there's a lot of government saying stay at home as much as you can, only go out to work as and when you need to. I know they're trying to entice people to go back to work, but there's going to be second wave, there's going to be peaks. So for the foreseeable future, even if this only lasts for 2-3 years, any sort of software that you can kind of bring out rapidly is going to help. And you might see a purchase of that software if you're a small company who's created that, or you might see an increase in productivity if you're a large company creating it internally. So I think it's really important to sort of have that new content that will support your employees at home. And using modern day technology. I'm so surprised how, I know smaller companies will be doing this, but larger companies still are stuck in the age of using, say, Windows 7, for instance, or like something like that, and software that just doesn't work on it. Real time online collaboration tools, Google Drive, Teams, Figma, small things that people can use at the moment, but it just helps and boosts sort of collaboration. And use these online tools. I know there's a huge risk and to get these things on board all the time, but this is the way of the world now, and the digital world is a lot more secure than it used to be 5-10 years ago, and it's getting more and more secure every day. So it's time to sort of take away so many of those risk parameters that people look at when they look at these tools and just start using them. And you're kind of being forced into it at the moment, I think, as well. COVID-19 has kind of pushed the digital world into using these things.
Yeah, I think you're totally right there. I mean, the tools are really key, aren't they? Getting the opportunity for miscommunication or duplicating work or just misunderstanding is really high now that everyone's remote, and especially people who aren't used to it. And getting the tools, for one, is a great way of just helping to smooth some of that over, getting tools that are actually built around those types of practices. And I also think as well that developing good systems is another really key focus for companies at the moment, because the tools are one thing, but you need some processes around them. And having some systems in place can really help just to make sure that everyone is aligned, everyone's working on the right things and working together in the most effective way. And of course, there's lots of ways to do that. And even just asking people to have a think about how they would want to work, or the challenges they face might be one thing. But IT teams are really uniquely placed, I think, in a lot of companies, in the fact that they have this culture of innovation about them quite often, especially in the large companies that maybe other departments don't have that level sometimes. And they can help with things like project management experience and just the level of technology experience that we have, that they can really dive in and help some of the other departments in the organization to develop systems that work for them.
And I do think this is where large companies actually have an advantage over the smaller companies. They have the funds and the resource to go out and make this software. They have the internal teams.
Because it takes time to get right, doesn't it? It takes time and money and trial and error. So it's not a one system fits all for every company. So yeah, you're right. It does definitely take time and resource. So large companies hopefully have that over smaller ones.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they do. And I think that it's kind of goes hand in hand with like companies now also relying on like a strong, like you said, systems and a strong network. Beforehand, they may have just relied on their internal network, and it might have been a bit shoddy, but you had an IT team on hand that you could go walk down to and sort of take your laptop to, and they can sort of fix it. I think now IT teams really need to start looking at their network, how it's set up, who's running it, if they can run it internally by themselves, or if they have to outsource to a bigger company. Tech giants like IBM are going to benefit from this, I think, massively from COVID-19, because every single large company now, or even every single, not even large companies, but they're all going to be looking to these tech giants to kind of come in and then just fix their network as quickly as possible and like make it as strong and secure for their staff or their employees working from home. There's obviously networks were built before for people to have internal access, not external access. So like this work from home now, it's kind of put massive pressure on that sort of outside external access into the network. And I know that quite a few companies are having issues with people working from home, external updates, things like that. I mean, it's being quite difficult for companies to kind of adjust to it quickly. but this is obviously where I think, like I said, tech giants will really benefit from this. And I think going back to the tools again, I think communication tools are key at the moment right now in making people feel part of the business community, as well as also keeping people within that network as well. It works on two fronts, but communication tools more than ever are going to be massively relied on. I mean, you look at Zoom, for instance. I hadn't heard of it, to be honest with you, before COVID-19 hit, and now all of a sudden it's massive. I mean, I bet Zoom are laughing. The amount of use that their content gets used, and all their tools get used. So, I mean, it's great for them. You must think that Teams are probably getting integrated everywhere. If not, Google Chat, for instance, probably be used in smaller companies, Google Meetings and all that kind of stuff. So I think that right now it's more important than ever just to have that communication tool there, because you can't just rely on things like email anymore. You need that sort of like that instant messaging, that sort of that video chat, that have that multiple layer of communication that you would do if you were offline.
My hope as well is that as we start going back to offices, that companies bear these types of technology in mind as well, because as we've discussed before, there's lots of good benefits you just get from using those anyway. Even if it's 1% of your company that eventually works from home, just having meetings that are video by default, even if it's just everyone in a meeting room with the video chat kind of on the go, it means that when people are remote, they're not excluded or different to everyone else, but they're just part of the same team and working in the same way that everyone else is. It's just that some people are together in an office and some are remote. So I do hope that as we start going back to offices, that technology isn't just left behind as one of those things we needed for the pandemic, and now we can go back to business as usual.
Yeah, it needs to be used going forward. It is part. It just makes every aspect of the job easier, and that's what that's what the tools are there for. So why not use them? And I think that people might have this sort of worry, especially larger companies might have this sort of worry of, well, we want to keep the culture as it was. We need to get people back into the office. We're paying for the space. So it's kind of regressing in a sense. But I think that once you get your employees to use tools for a certain amount of time, they get used to it. It's going to be hard for them to change. We talked about change before. They're going to have to change to adapt to using these new tools right now. And then going forward, it's going to be a situation of, actually, no, we don't want to change back anymore. We kind of want to move forward. And I think maybe the employees will actually push that forward and stop the companies from regressing themselves. There's going to be an increased amount of content and software and tools created across the world now. A huge amount. You'll just see it. It's naturally going to come with the way things are. So, with lockdown across multiple countries and restrictions, freedom outside of the home, the easiest way to communicate and the easiest way to sort of use these new tools is through digital right now. So I think that people aren't going to be using them. Content's now, it's going to, like any software, any content, any tools are now going to have a higher chance of being used because people need to adapt to that. So I think that they will have that situation of when it does go back to the normal. I mean, this might be the new normal that everybody says, but when it does go back to normal, these tools will probably still be used because people have adapted and companies have adapted to it. And it's just making a new change for the sake of making a new change. I just don't think it's needed. It'd probably take more effort actually to change back. So it's kind of no point really. I think at the moment, when it comes to tech, especially, innovation is key. Companies need to find a new way of sort of like how companies need to find a new way of how they're going to be able to operate within their business. So I think like you said before, I think IT companies are very IT teams are very innovative in their approach to things. And I think that right now there's going to be a huge reliance on them to sort of use that innovation and use that sort of innovative thinking in creating these new products that are going to really boost sort of maybe internal productivity, as well as if you're creating content for external use for your customer base. So I think that there's going to be a huge onus on that, and it's going to be really, really good for this sort of like tech boost and for the digital world. I think you're going to see so much new content and software out there that people are going to be in, tools that people are going to be able to use. It might actually sort of boost us to that next level. And sort of, and not keep us in that sort of same way of thinking that we're thinking at the moment. I mean, if I went back 20 years ago and said, you can get a mobile phone and it has apps on it, I wouldn't know what you're talking about. But that in itself is just a great piece of innovation. And you never know, out of this we might see this sort of the next phase of innovation.
I think you're right. Like, innovation is important, and like we've said, a lot of it is technology, but I think it's also probably a bad word for it, but UX as well. Like, having a good think about how the experience of people using whatever tools they're using or systems is going to be really important, isn't it? And do you think the UX needs to be better as we start going forward to a more distributed world?
Absolutely, and I was about to touch on that as well. Within the innovation is maybe people need to be sort of innovative in how they approach UX now. They need to adapt for all clients. If you think about our client base right now, we are you're gonna have a standard client base that every company is usually gone for. So the most people who kind of use digital, let's say, are between 18 to 50, for instance, and then people above that might start dropping off. That 50 to 80 now will be using online more than ever, because they're the ones who are locked down, and they're the ones who are going to need to use it, and they're the ones who are going to need to adapt. So UX needs to be really, really simple, and it needs to be on point. It just needs to be better. I mean, if we go out there at the moment, we see so many companies create content, and so many companies create marketing and websites, software, and it's all okay stuff, and the UX is okay, but it could be a lot better, and it does need to be able to. You do need to be able to adapt your UX for all your clients. So for a complete, for all the age ranges, and older people do struggle with modern day technology. So how can you make that as easy as possible?
Yeah, like we see this on so many apps and experiences that we use these days, don't we? Where the online version is just, it's so frustrating to use. And like we're pretty often locked into these companies because we've used their offline services for so much. But as we move into a world where there's more competition online, there's just going to be no excuse for putting up with that type of thing. And I think a lot of these things are built like they put up an online presence or website or form or version of a booking system or whatever it is. And it's put up and it's like, well, that's good enough. Get it out, and that will let people start using it. But as I say, there's going to be enough competition soon that people just won't accept a level that isn't great, basically. And you can introduce so much friction by putting in systems online that are just half baked. So it really is worth thinking about the UX, and for most people, that's just using it themselves and thinking, is this really, does this stand up to the competition out there, and is it seamless to use and easy for my customers to use, and aiming for that level with everything you do, whether it be offline or online. It really should be kind of the baseline at the very least.
I think there's two ways you can approach it, and I said it before earlier. It's about kind of this new way of like companies operating with employees being more rounded and having that more rounded role. You might find the developer role merges with the UX role going forward, and so you might have UX designers who are going to have to start learning how to code. You might have coders, developers who might have to start learning the UX side of things a bit more. And during this period, you might find there's a lot of content that comes out that's either shoddy in one area or shoddy in the other, because people just aren't trained on it. Eventually, it might become better, and then when you have a developer who understands UX as well as as a UX designer would, we might reach that point. But for the time being, I think you're going to see a period of where there's going to be a lot of this kind of shoddy content thrown out there where people are trying. I'm not going to say that people haven't tried their best, but it's just not their field of expertise. So you're not going to get that high level that you're expected to sort of reach.
But this is where, like, reaching out to external experts, whether that's agencies or consultancies or whatever else, especially for companies who don't have internal technology teams or product teams, can be really useful. But I'll be honest, the level we're still seeing out there from a lot of agencies just doesn't hit the mark. And it's worth just bearing in mind as the company that's employing an agency or whatever it is on your behalf to build these technologies for you. Don't just accept that they are the experts, because often your niche or your market will be different enough that you just need to apply some different thinking to. It would be a lot better, I think, if companies just paid a little bit more attention to what they're getting from some of the external agencies and consultancies, because it's unfortunate to see the amount of work out there that's still half-baked, even when it's developed by so-called experts.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we saw this before COVID-19 as well. There was a lot of people just kind of taking this approach beforehand of just, I'll be all right, I'll do.
Yeah.
Sort of mentality, and it's just not the way I work. I'm not going to call out big companies, but big companies do it. I swear there's a lack of testing at the moment that goes on before any sort of software or content is thrown out by big companies as well. It just needs to be improved. It really does, especially now there's a reliance on it. It really needs to be improved. And if you want your product, your content, anything digital to be better than everybody else, it's to have that testing, and it's to be more thorough. It's to, you said it before, I mean, maybe getting a digital team that's professional, but getting a good digital team, and this is where maybe their freemium service, if you are that digital agency, your freemium service can prove itself in terms of its content. And that's where you're going to stand out. But everything just needs to be better. That is the message here. And it just isn't good enough at the moment. So just to kind of wrap this up then, we talked about digital marketing before, and we talked about digital tools and content. I think the overall message really at the moment is, and I've just said it, is, make sure your digital marketing is spot on, have a positive message in there, focus it around the well-being side of things, have that sort of freemium service maybe that could help your business grow. You need to basically give confidence to consumers right now, because it's now more than ever, it's harder to sort of get people to part with their money. So, you need to be better. And I think that's the same sort of messaging with digital tools and content that you're creating as well. Everything just needs to be better. Yeah. And, when you're creating something, really think about, how is this better than anything else that I'm using at the moment? How is it going to support companies working from home, all companies that are like now based working from home? How is it going to support everybody who's now reliant completely on digital, and how can it be better?
Yeah, great summary. That's awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining us today. And next episode, as always, out in 2 weeks. And in the meantime, check out our other episodes. You can find all the information on our website, which is the digitaldifference.show. And yeah, we'll speak soon. Thanks so much.
Cheers, guys.
Thanks for joining us today, and we hope you've enjoyed the episode. We wanted to let you know a little about our digital agency. We design and build killer experiences and apps, and we also put out a bunch of free content to help companies of all shapes and sizes. Head to fluffdigital.com to find out more.